Hey guys, this is Havoc with hopefully a quick guide and some tips and tricks you can do for raiders when speedrunning outposts. I'm going to cover some general movement tips, corrosive cube traversal, issues with solid corrosive cubes, and then the mini attacks you can do with the Phoenix pod. The first thing that I see a lot of people not doing correctly or not knowing is that you can actually hold your jump button down to go higher. If I just tap my double jump, I go just about to there. If I hold down for both of those jumps, you go significantly higher and you stay in the air for significantly longer. Just generally helps you move around. The next one is kind of the bread and butter is grapple boosting or grapple jumping. It involves hitting a grapple to the ground in front of you and then jumping right after it collides and conserving the momentum. So it would look something like this. We're using hold jumps to go extra far. A tip to this that I see a lot of people not doing correctly is you want to release your movement keys when you're in the air. So if I hold W, if I'm in the straight line, I can't hold W, but generally it's just good muscle memory to not do that. If I strafe at all, I'm going to lose all of my momentum. So showing that here. As soon as I hold A, all of my momentum disappears. My other key, all my momentum disappears. If I'm holding W, I do keep my momentum straight, but if I turn my camera too much at all, it's all going to do the same thing. So release your movement keys right after you jump, and you're going to get much longer and cleaner grapple boosts. Another tip with grappling, this doesn't come up too much, it's more useful on parkour, but normally when you're grappling, you have to shoot your grapple, break out of the grapple, and then re-grapple. But you can skip that breaking out of the grapple if you have a weapon and during the weapon animation, you use your next grapple. I'm going to grapple, swing, and then shoot my grapple out. And it instantly shoots the grapple out without me having to manually break it and then re-grapple. So again, it's grapple, swing, grapple again. You can like chain these back and forth. It's kind of more of a parkour thing, but just a good thing to know about. Another good tip is grapple parrying. This will activate the frenzy boost. The frenzy speed boost. So it's important to do if you're trying to get that extra bit of speed and you don't have any targets to hit with your melee. You can shoot your grapple and then swing your melee, and it'll parry that grapple and you'll still get your boost. It's possible to do this with the sledge as well. The timing is just a lot tighter, so it's way easier to do with the Fury. And then the last kind of general trick is if you're ever going to use a stim, you want to try and get your frenzy boost right before the stim versus trying to get it afterwards. Because if I try and melee and then stim, it's like instant, but if I stim and then melee, I have to wait for my stim animation to finish. So stimming, I'm trying to melee and I can't for maybe about a second. But if I melee first, it's a much quicker animation, and then I can stim right away after that. So it's melee, and then my melee animation's canceled with the stim. That's like general tips. Now we're going to talk about going through corrosive cubes. So in a previous patch, you could only grapple through one corrosive cube, but now that they've changed the corrosive cube death time to 1.25 seconds, you can actually grapple through 2 corrosive cubes. Or you can grapple jump through the cubes just as well. Now, if you're going through 1 corrosive cube, you have 2 different options. You can still, I guess more. You can still grapple through it, but there may be some cases where you want to activate your stim, and you can just walk through them. You may not have a stim, but you still want to just walk through the cube. If you have something you can trigger frenzy with, you can melee it, and then frenzy gives you enough speed to still walk through corrosive cubes. Frenzy ran out there at the end. Another thing is you can lunge through these cubes. So normally you couldn't just walk through one cube, but if you're using the Fury, you can lunge through one cube. If you're using the sledge, you can lunge through 2 cubes. So that's everything about corrosive cube traversal. You can, yeah, I mean, there's, choose to use these however you see fit. The majority of the time, you're just going to end up grappling or grapple jumping through your cubes, as it's the most effective, but these corner cases are helpful. So moving on to these solid corrosive cubes, there's a lot of weirdness that goes on with them. I'm going to swap one of my weapons to show some of this. So this is more of a parkour thing. You can grapple onto the side of solid corrosive cubes, and if you break your grapple by either jumping or tapping the grapple button again, you can just keep hopping off of them. This next bit is what I'm going to call corrosive cube threading. There's a bit of a collision issue with these cubes where they don't extend all the way to the edge. You can kind of see that there. There's like a little bit of space between where this block is and where the block next to it is. And that allows some weird stuff. You can shoot through the gap between 2 corrosive cubes. You can also see if my cursor's red, I can lunge. I don't really get to lunge through that gap, but I still break the trap even with the lunge. And you can also throw equipment through this gap. That'll be more useful with Phoenix pods and stuff. But it's the same thing, although a bit tougher. You can still do it with these when they're touching each other like that. You can still throw stuff through there. You can do the same thing even with a single corrosive cube, where you can shoot through. If it's just cornered with another block, you can lunge through there, shoot through there. Same thing in this kind of setup. Let me get my bullets. You can still shoot through these. It's a bit weird, but anything that you can shoot through, you can also throw an equipment through. One other example like that. So now we're going to get onto the weirdness around Phoenix pods and the normal behavior of the Phoenix pod is you throw down a Phoenix pod, you'll respawn at it, but if you pick up the gen mat, the Phoenix pod will disappear, you no longer respawn. So if we tried to respawn, oh, we're dead. Let's reload this. If we throw a Phoenix pod up in the air, grab the gen mat, and then it lands, the Phoenix pod doesn't break, because the Phoenix pod only is considered active once it has actually landed on a block and it has activated. So if we were to die now, even though we threw this Phoenix pod before we picked up the gen mat, we can still respawn at that Phoenix pod. So some other ways you can use this is with Phoenix pod, what I call Phoenix pod stalling. And that involves an interaction between the flash barrier and the Phoenix pod. So if we throw down flash barrier, you can throw a Phoenix pod on top of that flash barrier and it'll stay there. You wait for the flash barrier to disappear. Phoenix pod hits the ground and activates. And same thing, we can respawn at that. But what you could do with this is you can throw your flash barrier down, throw a Phoenix pod on top of it. You get about 9 seconds afterwards to get to the gen mat, die, and then warp backwards about 9 seconds in the level to where you threw the Phoenix pod before. That's probably one of the most useful techs to do in speedrunning. There's some other tricks you can do with the Phoenix pod involving the collision or not collision, but once you bounce a Phoenix pod off of a barrier, you get some really interesting interactions. I'm trying to go over here now. This is called Phoenix pod sliding. Pod back. I throw one of these down, then throw a Phoenix pod. Even though the Phoenix pod is touching the surfaces of the traps, it won't activate until it's slid across all of the traps to a normal block. All traps have that same slide behavior. The Sentinels are slightly different. They're sort of in the ground a little bit. They're below the other traps. So You can't slide between plasma sentinels and normal tramps, but with just plasma sentinels, you can still slide across them. Showing that. Same thing, it activates once it hits the end. And then going back to that thing we had about being able to throw stuff through the cracks between solid corrosive cubes. You see it just threw these corrosive cubes down to there. You can do a similar thing if you have a phoenix pod slide off of a corrosive cube. So it slid through and then it went through this gap right here, and now the phoenix pod is underneath the map. So with all these tricks, you can find some interesting cuts on levels. Yeah, hopefully that was helpful.